Hey, folks, it's that time again. It is time for another Getting to Know Dynatrace session. Well, listen, folks, I have to tell you, I'm just coming off our own sales kickoff, and the news around here is just absolutely electric. There is so many new things that are going on. I have to borrow a phrase from one of my favorite movies, The Princess Bride, and I have to say, let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. So, folks, as with all Getting to Know Dynatrace sessions, what we like to do is we start off with a couple of upfront sessions, and I'm going to sum up a couple of really exciting things. And then what's going to happen is we're going to hand things over to our guest sales engineer today, and he's going to walk us through a demonstration of Dynatrace while you get to ask us questions. So let's get things started. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. And there we go. It's time for Getting to Know Dynatrace. Let's get into it. The first segment of Getting to Know Dynatrace is What's New? Wow. I have to take a pause for a moment because this session's What's New is huge. First off, if you're looking for what's new at Dynatrace, what you have to do is always go to dynatrace.com/news/blog, and that's where you'll be able to see all of the new exciting things that we have to talk about. And as you can see, I did a little bit of a screenshot and threw it up on there. The SaaS release notes for version 1265. I'm going to come back to that in a second because it just absolutely blows my mind. But you can see here that we have all sorts of other content that is super informative and interesting. I highly advise you to go in and give this content a read. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to flip over to another screen here. And that one is this article right here, because this is huge. This is massive news. Totally new. We actually now have a new subscription model. This is called DPS, the Dynatrace Platform subscription model. This is a new way for you to license and consume Dynatrace. It provides effectively full platform access. And when I start telling you about all of the new capabilities that are being released into the SaaS platform, you'll understand exactly why the DPS pricing model is exactly the right way that people are going to be able to maximize the amount of value that they get out of Dynatrace. And you can see here, I'm not going to go into all the details about this, but effectively, it's a simple contract. There's no hidden fees. And it's super easy to get set up and start consuming Dynatrace using this new platform subscription model. As a matter of fact, what we'll do is we'll make sure on a future version of Getting to Know Dynatrace, we'll make sure to actually spend some time and actually talk about this in a little bit more detail. So let's get back to my presentation here, and let's talk about the elephant in the room. Whoa, Dynatrace SaaS version 1265. The release notes are out. Okay, it's getting rolled out, folks. This is a big one. So what's included with this release? Well, everything and the kitchen sink. So first off, we have the Dynatrace App Engine. Essentially, you can now build applications on top of all of the data that Dynatrace is storing for you. We also have the automation engine. You can build out workflows to automate quite literally just about anything that you can do with Dynatrace. On top of that, there's new capabilities around our Site Reliability Guardian. There's now all of this sitting on top of that Grail data lakehouse so that you can query this data in a powerful way using DQL in ways that you haven't been able to query data before. And then there's other examples, things for, that we built on top of this new data lakehouse using the App Engine. One of the apps that we built ourselves is a Dynatrace carbon impact application. How interesting is that? If you're at all involved in ESG conversations inside of your organizations, and somebody actually asks you the question about what your carbon footprint is for your compute, for your workloads, Dynatrace now can provide those answers to you. That's absolutely incredible. And just one example of what you can do with Dynatrace using this new app engine on top of that Grail data lakehouse. I could go on and on and on. This is super exciting. Now, if you go in and look at the release notes, you can see that we started rolling this out as of 2 days ago, as a matter of fact. So it's going to be a staggered rollout. So over the next couple of weeks, you're going to see more and more changes in the Dynatrace UI when you're using Dynatrace SaaS, and you have the option now to flip into a new design system that we have, and then get access immediately to that app engine, the workflow engines, the site reliability guardian. So folks, it's exciting times here at Dynatrace, let me tell you. So let's move on to the next segment, because no, you didn't come here to listen to me talk. You came here to get to the demo. But before we do that, we got to do one more segment, and that is, did you know? This is critically important, because now that we have this incredible data lakehouse that is designed around DevOps and AppSec, now that we have a way of storing data in a really unique fashion that you can query on the fly without having to spend time figuring out how I want to index my data. Now that we have that, how are you going to access this? And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to take a moment and say, did you know that Dynatrace has a rich and powerful API? So our API, it extends across so many parts of the platform. We have APIs for allowing you to access the data with inside of that Grail data lakehouse. We have APIs that allow you to use Dynatrace to ingest data. We have APIs that allow you to configure Dynatrace, so you can programmatically configure Dynatrace. So imagine this, as you are pushing out new builds, you can literally change the configuration of Dynatrace as those new builds are being pushed out. This is an incredibly rich set of functionality that is ridiculously, it's ridiculously powerful in terms of what it allows you to do to automate the way in which Dynatrace can act, behave, be configured. So folks, this information is all available in our help documentation. There are examples. There's all sorts of different pieces of information about our APIs. I can't go into all of it in detail because, as I said before, let me explain. There is too much. Let me sum up. We have a very rich and powerful API. All right, folks, that's it for this segment of Getting to Know Dynatrace. Let's get to the really good part, which is the demo. And this week, our guest solution engineer is Tom Clinkenbeard. Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Doing good, Jonesy. How about you?
I'm doing great. So let's get back into this thing here. Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's get into a demonstration.
Yeah, so I'm a solutions engineer with Dynatrace. I'm actually finishing up my first year in that role. Prior to that, I was working on the services side with Dynatrace for about 3 years. So I think coming up on 4 or 5 years here, I'm already losing track of time.
Wow. That's right on, man. You know what? That time does go fast, doesn't it? So, folks, as Tom gets set up to do the demonstration, feel free to ask questions. That's what makes Getting to Know Dynatrace so special, are the questions that you ask. So, sit down, whatever you're using to connect to us with, if you're using LinkedIn, if you're using Facebook, if you're on YouTube, if you're on Twitch, whatever it might be, just go ahead and type in your question. We'll do our best to get to those questions and belt out an answer for you. And with that, let's get going, Tom.
All right, let me get this shared quick. And there we go. We should be seeing a dashboard. Looking good.
It's a little fuzzy. Hopefully, video will catch up in a bit. But
let me see. We were having issues earlier. Let me see if turning off my camera helps. Uh-oh.
Still
Looks
a
like
little fuzzy. I tell you what, let's just why don't you just keep getting into it, Tom, and we'll see if that video catches up. Okay.
Yeah. Just let me know how it's going. Yeah, so this is a dashboard in Dynatrace. I like to show it first, both to highlight kind of everything we capture, as well as one of the things that you may learn as you kind of go forward on your Dynatrace journey is that you may start seeing less and less of dashboards, just because you'll be using more of the automation of Dynatrace. So um, we have the capability to use them, but you may not use them as much the more you get used to Dynatrace. So first, to kind of show here kind of the breadth of what Dynatrace can show you, so we can take a look at application health, your top web applications, what their kind of ratings are performance wise, and then get down one step lower on our Smartscape, which is services and databases, how those perform, and then down to the base of our Smartscape, which is the host health. And I'll explain what the Smartscape is in a little bit here. And then your network or cloud and virtualization, security problems, and your active problems. And then, kind of one of the things that you don't always see in a Dynatrace demo, but I like to highlight, is we can import business metrics into Dynatrace. So you can dashboard not only technical data, but how that technical data is impacting your business's bottom line. So the next question is, how do I get this started? So that's with the Dynatrace One agent. Very simple. Basically, you select what flavor of operating system you're using, and then from there, for example, on Linux, you can go ahead and hit the copy buttons, run those on your Linux machine, and you should be all set within about 5 minutes if it takes a little bit longer than than normal. So once you've got the one agent on your host, what's going to happen is we're going to start importing host level data as well as other data, but this is kind of the easiest place to start. So we'll see your normal infrastructure information like CPU, system load, network information, memory, all that fun stuff that you're used to. But what's really important about the one agent is it's capturing all of this information, but it's also capturing the processes that are running on the host. So regardless of technology, we're going to start capturing metrics related to those technologies. So Go, Apache, Tomcat, pretty much anything you can think of, the one agent is automatically going to start ingesting metrics specific to those technologies without any extra configuration or setup. Dynatrace's one agent, hence the name, is designed to basically handle anything you throw at it without any extra work around it. And what Dynatrace is going to do after that is it's going to create something called the Smartscape. The Smartscape is basically a live topology of your environment based on what Dynatrace is able to see. So we can see this is the host we were looking at. These are those different technology processes that I was talking about earlier. And then we can see web request services all the way up to your websites as well as your mobile applications. And you get kind of this architectural diagram of everything, and it's live as you go through um, Dynatrace. So it's pulling in everything from a live perspective. So it's always up to date, whereas you'll have an architectural diagram that you drew up 6 months ago. Well, if you've added something since then, that is out of date now, whereas Dynatrace is automatically going to be up to date with any changes that are made. Are there any questions so far, Jonesy, that we want to stop for or keep going?
I realize that I'm muted here. Yeah, we actually have a couple of questions. We're dropping some answers into the chat. Let me go here. First question I've got is Sergi on LinkedIn. When will those features be available in Dynatrace Managed? So, Sergi, that is an excellent question. I'll have the straight up answer is that for now this functionality really depends on the multi-parallel processing capabilities that the cloud provides. So this is very much exclusive to SaaS. And the reason for that is that the size of the clusters that we have that are supporting our architecture are just simply massive. It's not something that anyone I could imagine would ever reasonably want to stand up in their own environment. So for for the now, all of this new capabilities, the automation engine, the app engine, the Grail data lakehouse, it is very much focused on our SaaS delivery model. But that's a great question. I appreciate that. We had another question here about limits calls that we can make to the API. So that's actually within our documentation. That sometimes it depends on sometimes it depends on the type of call that's being made. But basically, if you just do a quick search for Dynatrace access limits, you'll be able to get that right off the bat. As a matter of fact, I think we just dropped a shortened link to that in the chat window. So go ahead and give that, and I'll give you some details as to what our rate limits are. And so, folks, if you're wondering what that means, is often what happens is when organizations expose an API for you to be able to pull information, they tend to put controls around this. And these controls, they really are about just, ensuring that the overall health of the platform is there for everyone. And so those rate limits, they're pretty common standard stuff in the industry. Anyone who has an API typically has rate limits associated with them. And ours, to be fair, if you look at ours are pretty close to what you see elsewhere. All right. Let's see. You know what? Actually, you know what? Let's just keep going. Let's keep going, Tom. But before you do
Yep.
that, one of the things I really like about the Smartscape is that it kind of gives you a view into how our AI sees the world.
Hmm.
Our AI is a combination of a deterministic AI model, which is really, really unique in the industry. It has a view of the world, and its view of the world means that there is structures. There are vertical understandings that we have. Applications run on services, they run on processes that run on hosts that exist inside of data centers. But then there's also horizontal relationships. And you can see here that one center blue entity is actually connecting out to multiple other entities. That is an example of horizontal relationships. Every entity that you see on the screen also has that vertical relationship as well. That model is a key component that allows Davis to immediately understand the relationship between what's being monitored and what's being talked to, and understand all of those dependencies. And then on top of that, what's happening is for every one of those entities, we're pulling in metrics. And those metrics, we're baselining them. And we use machine learning to analyze those metrics. And if there are performance bottlenecks, if there are errors and exceptions, if there are, issues, then that's where that Davis AI takes that information and bubbles it up into something like a problem card. So our AI is very, very practical. It works out of the box, doesn't require extensive training. It is, just like I said, it's a very practical approach to AI. So, Tom, why don't you just keep going with the demo, and let's just keep going.
Yeah, and to just kind of hammer home the last point of the Smartscape. So, kind of, Jonesy, as you mentioned, we're collecting all of these metrics, but each one of these lines basically is our AI determining and understanding the context behind those metrics, how it's interacting with other services, hosts, or applications here. So Dynatrace is collecting more than just data and metrics. It's collecting the context behind those metrics, and that's how a lot of our AI works. So I'll go ahead and talk a little bit more about the data that we collect. So at the service level, we're collecting things like response time, failure rate, CPU, and throughput. So we know kind of at a service level how you're performing. Are things running slow? Are they performing correctly? Are you getting failures? And this is one of the places where our AI is helping out, where it's creating these dynamic baselines where the example I always give is if you have an application that is like a time card application, 5 o'clock on a Friday, you're going to have a lot of traffic. You might see things slow down a little bit. You're going to see throughput go up quite a bit. And our AI is aware of things like that. It's going to know that, on a Friday in the afternoon, people are filling out their time cards. So it's going to create that dynamic baseline where you can see, okay, we are aware that things slow down on Fridays, so we don't need to hear about it. So you don't need to configure anything to tell Dynatrace, we're aware of what's going on here. Dynatrace is automatically going to do that, so you're not going to see an alert storm come in on Friday in the afternoon when no one wants that to happen, and they especially don't want it to happen because it's something they already know about. So Dynatrace is collecting these metrics and using them without any assistance from humans to basically make it easier to use Dynatrace and understand the data coming out of it. So this is the way I put it is the third level on our Smartscape, and the last level at the top is the application. So what we do to kind of generate our view of the application is actually look at the sessions that are being where users are interacting with your applications. So here we can see we get some metadata about the session. So we have real user tagging going on here. So we know the user's name is Michael, or it would be an email, however you set it up to understand that. We can have the operating system, IP address, ISP, the browser that it's running on. So all of this metadata is also used by the AI. So if a problem comes up and you start seeing slowness or JavaScript errors, these are pieces of metadata that Dynatrace can use to understand, is this specific to any one of those pieces of metadata? The one I most commonly see is, we'll see JavaScript errors on a specific browser. That's analysis that our AI will have done for you, so you don't have to go back and dig through all the sessions to figure out, okay, this is only happening on Chrome. We've provided that information for you so that you can get to a resolution faster. So that's just the metadata of the session. So if we get into the data itself, here we have events and actions, and this is basically a step-by-step walkthrough of what the user did. So we can see, they loaded the home page, how long that takes, and then we have an Apdex rating, which is based on a standard in the industry of how quickly and how performant things need to be for a user to kind of accept that performance. And we see as they walk through our easy travel travel booking application, we kind of see they're searching the pages, looking for a trip to go on. They're clearing it out and looking for a new trip. And at the very end, we can see they did end up booking it. So that's another piece of data that we can pull from Dynatrace is the conversions of your web pages, or basically are users completing the objective of that application. So for this, you would pull in whether or not sorry about that, whether or not users are booking their trips successfully. So if you see that kind of dip down and we see a technical problem tied to it, you'll be able to tie some business metrics to that as well. So these are kind of the four levels of Dynatrace, and I'll go back to the Smartscape quickly. So hosts, and then processes, services where we're collecting response time and failures, and then applications where we're seeing those user sessions and pulling that all together. So then finally, the question comes down to, what is Dynatrace doing with all of this data, this so much data? How is a human supposed to look at all of this, as well as all the context tied to that data? So that's kind of what's behind Dynatrace. Is we don't want humans doing all of that analytical work on their own. We have Davis, the AI, in the background doing a lot of that for you. And what that does is that creates a problem ticket. So when something goes wrong in your environment, Dynatrace is going to do a lot of that analysis for you and present you with something that's easily readable to a human, so that rather than doing the analysis, they're able to get to a resolution faster. So here on the left, we
Hey, Tom.
Go ahead.
Just before we get into the explaining the problem card, we've got a couple more questions that popped up. Let's see what we got here. We have a question which is, is the feature location agnostic? It's a great question. Can I identify where my end user is accessing the application from? And the answer to that is, yeah, absolutely. So what Dynatrace does is we actually use a third-party resource. It is a geolocation database called MaxMind. And what that allows us to basically do is it allows us to match up an external IP address with this geolocation database. So we could say, hey, this user is coming from New York, or this user is coming from India, or this user is coming specifically from New South Wales in Australia. It can actually be very granular. It will give you location down to the city. And you can use that information to create all sorts of different visualizations and dashboards. Now, if you're using Dynatrace in an internal setting, your IPs might not resolve back to a location within MaxMind. So you might just have internal IP addresses. In that situation, you can actually go in and configure Dynatrace to say, hey, this range of IPs is this office, or this office and this floor within this office. So there's all sorts of interesting things that you can do to map your own geolocations if you're using Dynatrace in a situation where the application happens to be very much an internal application where you're not exposing any sort of outside geographic location to that. That was a really great question. Thank you for asking that. Let's see. I think that's it. We caught up on the questions, and so let's get into the really cool stuff, which is the problem card. Okay, Tom. So let's get back into that.
Yep. So yeah, we'll see the business impact analysis here. So how many users were affected across everything that's going on. This is another place where that location data comes in. This is something I saw very frequently when I was still on the services side, was people wanted to know, is this affecting one geolocation more than another? And this Dynatrace's AI will help you determine, is that the case, or is this more of a ubiquitous issue? We have session replay for some of those sessions. So we'd be able to go and click into this and see which sessions were impacted, and then also view a reconstruction of those sessions and see how that visually actually looked to the end user. Scrolling down a little bit, we have the impacted application. So basically, if you've got multiple different components that are being impacted, this will give you an inventory of what was impacted, so you don't have to kind of go around and figure out who's got to deal with what. Dynatrace already has that for you, so you don't have to call people who aren't related to the issue. Next is the visual resolution path. So this I'm going to click into. There's a few things I want to focus on here. So this is going to show, as the problem evolves, which components were impacted and how they impact each other. So if I kind of drag this back to the beginning and hit the play button, we can see the different components up at the top get impacted, and then more being impacted. And basically we see as this cascades across your environment. I think this here is about the peak of the problem. Now, what's important about this, and why I usually stop here, is to highlight this 47 ongoing events and 12 components. And a lot of other observability tools, that would result in 47 different alerts going to 12 or 47 different groups of people, who then all get on a phone call and start pointing fingers to say, okay, who actually owns this problem? Where is this coming from? With Dynatrace, you're just getting that one alert. You still have the context that's shown here to say, okay, these are all the different pieces that are involved in the problem, but you don't have a whole slew of alerts going out to a whole bunch of people. This is just going to go to the people who need to know about it. And the next part will kind of show who will actually need to act on it. So if I go back to the problem card, I'm saving the best for last, which is the root cause analysis. So Dynatrace is going to use that visual resolution path, look at all the metrics coming through using the context of the Smartscape, and determine where did the problem come from. And from here, we can see it's this check destination service. And one of the kind of extensions of this is we have this integrated with ServiceNow. And Dynatrace was actually able to see that there was a deployment event right before this problem occurred. So it's able to pull that deployment event out of ServiceNow and say, hey, this happened right before the problem, so this is likely tied to that. And now, instead of having 47 alerts going to 12 different teams, we've gotten this one alert. And we also have information that Chuck Ryan is the person who made this deployment um, before the problem went out. So we can go straight to the correct person to say, hey, there was an issue with your deployment. Can you roll that back and make a fix to the code once you find out whatever went wrong? And then they can use Dynatrace to do a postmortem and see what went wrong. And even in this case, we've kind of automated it even one step further, where we have a remediation action from Ansible Tower. So we didn't even have to go to Chuck Ryan in this case. We had this tied to Ansible Tower to say, hey, if we see a problem that occurs out of this deployment, we can use Ansible Tower to run this remediation job and roll it back without even having to contact anyone. The email will still go to the correct people, so they'll know something went wrong and that some code needs to be changed for their next deployment. But you won't have any human interaction with the problem to kind of roll it back and basically get to it before it's going to start impacting end users or as fast as possible. So that's really kind of the magic of Dynatrace, is going from a very simple install to this full stack observability of all your applications and all of your environments, and then kind of finalizing with this system that's kind of, it's got your back in your IT environment to do a lot of the grunt work analysis, do a lot of that for you, so that when a problem does occur, you spend more time resolving it as quickly as possible rather than doing a whole bunch of analysis work. And then your employees, the people you've hired, can go back to what they were hired for, which is typically in most organizations nowadays, innovating so that their web applications, their mobile applications are competitive in their markets. So that's kind of the long and short of Dynatrace.
So we have some more questions that are popping up. I tell you
Mhm.
what, how will we do this, Tom? The question that we've got right now is, what's the process group monitoring? That's actually kind of that's an interesting question. We tend not to go down to talk about things at this level. And let me explain it this way. Actually, Tom, no, if you go back to the screen that we were just looking at,
Okay.
and if you go ahead and click on the service, the check destination service,
Hmm.
this actually does a pretty good job of explaining it. So right here, what Tom's done is, in the infographic, he's actually clicked on the processes that are supporting this service. These processes, there could be multiple processes running on multiple hosts, but serving the same function. And so what Dynatrace does is, it's smart enough to understand these individual processes are actually part of something that we call a process group. So if we go ahead and click on one of these guys, yeah, let's just go grab him as an example. So we're looking at the individual process right now, but if I go into the ellipsis right next to the title, I could say view process group. So if there was multiple individual processes, now they're being grouped together here. So the idea is that the process group is just that. It's a logical process group that's made up of individual processes. This is 100% automatically discovered. However, if you get into a situation where you want to have more control over the way that we're doing it automatically, you can absolutely go in and change the configuration to control exactly how process groups are defined. So this is actually a really great question. Thank you for that. We tend not to go down into that level of detail when we do these demos, but that's the magic of getting to know Dynatrace, is when people are throwing questions out like that, and we get to go down little rabbit holes that we tend not to go down. So that's fabulous. There's another question here, but I think it's really specific to a use case. And, this is one of those questions where I kind of wish I was looking at it, myself before I went ahead and tried to answer it. What we can do is, let's do this. So here, someone was looking to get a request count off of one user ID. Tom, why don't you bring us into a user session?
Yep.
So in this user session, if we scroll down and say go to the first user action. All right, and let's go look at the waterfall analysis. So this is a user action. This is effectively, we're loading a page, but what you'll notice is this user, okay, loading this page, there's actually 5 different traces that were generated. So here is a really easy way that I could be looking at a user doing something. And in this particular case, I can go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to see now, the traces that were associated for this. I can even go in and click on that view service flow for those actions. And this actually gives us the logical service flow for those traces. So here you can see that inbound request is hitting actually a proxy. Then it's going on to a front end service. It goes from, in this particular case, it looks like Tomcat to Nginx. That's then split off into a couple of microservices. And then we're going into a couple of backend services in parallel. And you can just see how deep these transactions go. And Dynatrace collects that actually all the time. These traces, we will automatically start creating, collecting these traces and connecting them. So at any point in time when I go into one of these traces, you'll see here we use the term pure path. Pure path is, folks, 100% Dynatrace jargon, right? It's a name that we came up with to denote a collection of spans and traces, because we know that while the basic common denominator might be a span, that any transaction request could actually go a whole bunch of different locations. And so the pure path actually allows us to see all of this. And so what we can do from the pure path view is actually start connecting the dots. And there's all sorts of different things that we can tie together. We can tie together, down to the method or code level sort of synopsis as to what's going on with that transaction. We could tie it back to the logs. There's all sorts of different things that we can do with this. We can run queries across our traces. So it's a very, very powerful way of being able to filter data. And again, I'm going to get back to what we were talking about at the beginning of today's session, which was the new release of Dynatrace, the new version of Dynatrace SaaS. Very shortly, very soon, Dynatrace will be storing this trace information within that Grail data lakehouse. And I will be able to use that DQL to not only query a log, but to query my traces. And so I'll be able to connect the dots between my trace information and my log information. And this is exceptionally powerful for organizations. There is information that potentially could be caught within the trace that never gets logged. And that is super powerful to make sure that people have access to that. So this is critical for when you want to pull out really unique business information about a particular transaction. So great question. Thank you for that. Let's see here. What else do we got? Wow, it's a long question. Is Dynatrace using any sort of AI machine learning in the background of the analysis? Can you give some basic examples of machine learning that's being used? So yes, as a matter of fact, we are. So first off, the overall model that Dynatrace uses, as we explained when we were looking at this, is very much deterministic AI model, which is, the reason that we denote the difference of that is when it comes to deploying Dynatrace, being able to automatically connect different types of entities together and generate this view, and then use this data to actually automatically generate those problem cards. What we found was machine learning, classic machine learning, while interesting for understanding patterns or trends within, say, a measure or a time series, it doesn't lend itself to understanding relationships very, very easily, and certainly not in a quick fashion, because it takes time for machine learning to learn how things are related to each other. This deterministic model The reason that we chose it was we saw what the US Department of Defense, NASA, the FAA, we saw what they were doing in applying AI and deterministic models for things related to fault domain isolation. And using this deterministic approach, what we found was we got immediate benefit. So, a perfect example of why this is so powerful is that imagine trying to monitor modern workloads. Modern workloads are very ephemeral. What do I mean by that? They can live for a very short period of time. I could have a situation where I need to spin up a bunch of clusters and spin up a bunch of containers at a moment's notice to deal with some load that's incoming. And then, as soon as that load is done, we're going to deprecate it because we don't need that compute anymore. We're just going to kill those containers and deprecate them. So in that scenario where I am, within a moment's time spinning up load and then deprecating it, classic machine learning really doesn't deal with that in a very fast fashion. And that's why we use this deterministic model. That being said, when we are analyzing time series information, machine learning becomes very useful. It becomes useful for doing things like understanding seasonality. And what do we mean by seasonality? Tom actually he talked about this for a bit. Seasonality in terms of, imagine you're a bank. What happens on the 15th and the 30th of every month? You're going to see these traffic spikes because everybody's logging in to see that they got paid and maybe pay their bills. So that is a very common sort of occurrence. And you would see that traffic pattern, and you can use machine learning to understand and change the behavior of what you want to do based upon that seasonal type traffic pattern. So seasonality doesn't necessarily mean, like a Black Friday event. It can be, specific events that occur on known occasions, like, the 15th and the 30th of every month for a bank. So machine learning has its place, and we absolutely use machine learning for all sorts of different things. And we have all sorts of different machine learning models and algorithms that we use. We have machine learning algorithms that we use for noise reduction. We have machine learning algorithms that we use for predictive analysis. As a matter of fact, with the new platform, you're going to be able to go into these notebooks. And in these notebooks, you can create a query. And then you will be able to apply different machine learning models to that data that's coming back from that query. So from a data analysis standpoint, we're super excited about what the new platform is going to allow. I don't know who asked that question, but thank you so much. I don't get a chance to talk about that kind of stuff as much as I would like to, but that was a great question. Thank you. All right, what else do we? You know what? I've been talking so long. Tom, over to you. Let's get back into the demo here.
I covered pretty much everything I was planning on covering. I usually finish up with the problems page, which disappeared on me. Anything else you think I should cover while we're here?
Let's do you think you feel comfortable doing let's do a little AppSec, because I thought I saw a question around
Yes.
AppSec at some point pop up in the background.
Yep. Yeah, someone had asked about the blocking capability. So yeah, so we have a newer-ish, it's really not all that new at this point, feature in Dynatrace where we're able to look at basically third-party vulnerabilities in your code. And I think really one of the best parts of it is the kind of prioritization it does. It tells you basically what you should focus on first. So in a partnership we have with Sneak, we use their database to basically pull in what vulnerabilities are known out there, and there's a score, security score associated with that. But the context that Dynatrace captures allows for us to adjust those scores a little bit. So here is a good example. We have this deserialization of untrusted data vulnerability. And what Dynatrace is able to do is it's basically able to use the context that it's aware of to adjust that score. So here we see there's public exposure here. So that means there's an endpoint somewhere here that someone could use to get to this component, this log4j core component. The next piece is there's reachable data assets, which basically just means that there's a database in there, so someone can A, get in from the internet, and B, have access to a database. Not good. And this other component here is that it's a public exploit. It's something that people are aware of and can utilize if they're able to. But what we don't have here is there's no vulnerable functions in use at this time. So while a bad thing to have in your environment, this is one thing that's kind of reducing that score. Although I really think it's only reducing it by about 0.2. And what we could do from here is go in and see, where is this occurring? So you don't have to kind of look here, there, and everywhere. Dynatrace is going to tell you where you need to focus your efforts. So if we scroll down here, kind of as we saw with the problem page, we could see basically an inventory of where this is occurring and where you need to go to fix this. So we could look at, these are the Kubernetes clusters that are being impacted. This is that database that had been mentioned. So, if we know there's customer data there, we really need to get on this, because obviously this is something we don't want exposed. Which applications does this apply to? The services and the hosts. So we have this security component that basically tells you in an organized fashion, these are the exploits that are out there in your environment, and these are the ones that you need to resolve more quickly. Jonesy, you'll have to keep me honest here. There's also a blocking feature. So
Yeah,
for
yeah,
known types of injection attacks,
yeah,
you can tell Dynatrace to actively block those, since it's got that insight into the code. I
yeah.
forget, is that out now or is that
It is.
upcoming still?
No, no, it's absolutely out. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and so let's just talk about this for a moment as well, because it's super interesting. So, folks, think of it this way. Dynatrace, our agent, it sees all of the inbound requests. We understand and we can look for known malicious patterns within those requests. So, for example, if somebody's trying to execute a SQL injection or a JNDI attack, we can actually see that that inbound request has a part of it is formatted, in a way that represents or effectively is a JNDI attack. By turning on the attack blocking, we just simply block that request. That's it. It's literally Dynatrace now sees an inbound request, and what we do is we're going to fail that request. We're going to deliver to that attacker an exception. They're going to see that that request is failed. But now we also have information about that attacker. We can see the IP address where they came from. We can use that and match it back automatically with that GeoMind, MaxMind database to know where that attack is coming from. So this is a very, very powerful way to be laser focused and be able to block specific types of attacks. Now, this is not meant as a panacea. It's not meant to go out and replace all of your WAFs and that type of thing, but it does allow you to get that extra bit of security specifically around those known types of vulnerabilities and attacks. The Log4j, basically opened up a whole bunch of issues related to people being able to execute, for example, these JNDI attacks. And this is a perfect example of how we can just be really focused. We're not going to break an application by turning this on, and that's the problem sometimes with those with your WAF rules that you put in place. All of a sudden, you see a type of inbound attack, and what you do is you just put in a generic rule that basically is going to block all traffic from somewhere. And in that case, you could potentially break your application that way. And we've seen it happen. This is a really different approach. It's super different. It's just really laser focused on those individual known types of requests. And so again, it's an additive layer of security. And we're super excited that it's now part of what Dynatrace offers on the AppSec space. Great questions about this stuff, folks. Really, really enjoy it. All right. We have about 10 more minutes. There's a couple more questions that are coming in. But before we do that, oh, wait. Is it mandatory to have an active gateway for real user monitoring? So that's an interesting question. If you are using Dynatrace in a managed capacity, so managed being an on-premise capacity where you're hosting the Dynatrace cluster yourself, there is a capability that is called a cluster active gate. And if you want to use real user monitoring, you would typically use that cluster active gate as where the we call it the beacon. This is the data that's coming back from the page load. That beacon data has to go somewhere, and typically it would go to a cluster active gate. Now, if you're using us in a SaaS fashion, that's all kind of built into the SaaS tenants that we spin up, and you don't really have to set up a separate one in those scenarios. That's a really interesting question. We don't get that kind of question a lot, so thank you. Do we have any other questions coming up? Let's see. What do we got? Sorry, let me just look at this. With the issue of vulnerabilities, can we block it? Yeah, we just basically covered that, talking about the attack blocking. So, for certain types of attacks, like the JNDI SQL injection attacks, those are attacks that it's really easy for us to understand when we look at the actual inbound request. That, hey, this request is formatted in a really weird way. It's not formatted in a way that someone would normally be making a request. And so we can see that and then just basically fail that request by just generating an exception. The malicious actor gets nothing other than we now know where they're coming from because we captured their IP. So thanks for that, guys. We're going to make sure that we do interesting things with that information. Thanks for letting us know, those malicious actors, where you are. Do the cluster active gates only work with managed environments, or do they use with SaaS? No, typically the cluster active gates are used with managed. There is no real need for a cluster active gate with a SaaS deployment. So, folks, active gates. Let's just talk about them for a second. These are utility servers. That's the easiest way I could describe them. There are different types of active gates with Dynatrace. Some active gates can be used for generating synthetic traffic. Other active gates can be used as agent aggregators. Other active gates can be used to connect to your Kubernetes or your cloud subscription or your VM clusters. Active gates can also be used in a managed capacity. We call them cluster active gates, to essentially provide a secure endpoint so that all traffic is going to be regulated and driven through that active gate. And it's not like people are going directly against the cluster, which is what we would never want to have that happen. So, great question. Again, wow, today we're getting the questions from all places. Like, no, we rarely get questions about the active gates. In managed Dynatrace, the minimum refresh time is 1 minute. Is it possible to see or trace the live transaction logs? So I think what you're asking is, can you get like a tail as data is coming in? And at this point, no, not it doesn't really exist that way. It's typically done on these 1 minute polling intervals in terms of what gets displayed on the screen, right? So, for example, dashboards, they tend to be updated every minute, that type of thing. And while the timestamps for the data that does come in, it is going to be unique. So it's not like you're going to get 1 minute chunks of data, that type of thing. It's just the way in which that we control access to that data. It is very controlled because we want to make sure that Dynatrace itself is highly performant. And in certain cases, to avoid situations where you could potentially cause the actual Dynatrace environment to slow down, we do put controls and we do put some regulations on how often things will be updated, and what the slices of data are, or the slices of time are for that data. It's a good question. So sometimes we throw, people throw out, terms like real time and that type of thing with Dynatrace. Whereas, when we're using it through, say, the interface like we're looking at right now, it's more of a near real time sort of approach. That being said, as data is coming into Dynatrace, if that data is itself, subject to for example, a configuration that you're looking for like a certain number of events that are occurring within a certain amount of time. That's actually below it's kind of below the hood, and that doesn't necessarily impact things like alerting on high volume transactional data, that type of thing. Great question, thank you. We got 5. Oh no, we got more questions. All right. Oh yes, we have deployed multiple Docker images in OpenShift environment, and it's monitored by Dynatrace. Will Dynatrace show the vulnerabilities for that images? Yeah, as a matter of fact, that is an option. So Tom, could you just go into the settings for a moment? And if we go into the security options, application security, there we go. Keep going down, and there it is. And let's go into I think it's in general settings. Yeah, so here you can actually see that Kubernetes, as an example, is one of the options that you can turn on. And so in this scenario, we absolutely use our AppSec to look for vulnerabilities related to third-party components that are within your Kubernetes builds. And I'm pretty sure if we actually go into Kubernetes itself and start drilling down into some workloads, I'm pretty sure those screens actually do show up. So if we drop into one of these clusters here.
Oh, that's not where I want.
No, I'm sorry. I think we want to go over to the actual cluster itself. Go to the
cluster.
left. Okay. Yeah, right there. And if we scroll down, does it have the vulnerabilities show up here? If it's yeah, there it is. Yeah, it shows up right there. So again, hey, thanks for that question. That was a great question. And yes, the answer is yes, absolutely it does. All right, we got 3 minutes. Tom, we've covered so much, and we've had like just amazing questions. And folks, that is what makes getting to know Dynatrace so special. Thank you so much for those questions. I think we're going to call it a wrap. Tom, did you have any final words?
One I always go to is if you want to learn more about Dynatrace, we do have Dynatrace University. So if you're wanting to know more, and we don't have one of these scheduled super soon, I don't know when the next one is off the top of my head. Dynatrace University is a really good resource for getting some bite-sized information out of Dynatrace, and also doing things like certifications as well.
Well, listen, and thank you very much, Lakshmi. That's a great shout out. Appreciate that. Thank you, Mahesh. Absolutely. Hey, Tom, thank you very much. You've just, we've polished off another getting to know Dynatrace session. That was awesome. Great demonstration. And folks, thank you for your questions. Those are absolutely fabulous. Stay tuned for future getting to know Dynatrace sessions. We're going to spend some time and go over in detail more of that new functionality that's now been released. So as I mentioned at the beginning of today's conversation, it's a staggered release. It's slowly going to make its way out to everyone. Eventually, as soon as you do like a free trial, it's immediately going to be available to you. The new design system, the app framework, the workflow engine, all of it. It's just so much. We're going to have a lot of really interesting sessions of getting to know Dynatrace over the next few weeks. So, folks, stay tuned. Thank you very much. And as always, you want to give Dynatrace a try, go to dynatrace.com trial and take it for a spin. So with that, let's call it a day, and we'll see you the next time on Getting to Know Dynatrace.